Let me tell you what was done to you, what was done to your father and his father before him. The quality of life you experience right as you are hearing this right this second was invented before Thomas Jefferson's team invented the light bulb. The actual mechanism, the architecture of it. Because what you are experiencing right now, this gap between the man you know you could be and the man your circumstances permit you to be, is not a personal failing. It is the intended outcome of a system that was engineered long before you were born and has been running on you, through you, and around you every day of your life. Here's where it gets deep. You help it work. Not because you are weak, because you are programmed to. You were born into a caste. The matrix has you. It has you in a carefully designed financial category on a pre-mapped out chart drawn with your DNA in mind. It's not publicly or formally recorded. You can't just go and see where you are appointed on a chart on the wall. It doesn't need to be written down. It doesn't need to be enforced at gunpoint. It is enforced by belief, by expectation, by the architecture of opportunity itself, and most importantly, it's enforced by you. You enforce your own position in the caste system more reliably than any external authority ever could. That is the genius of the design. The cage is invisible because it isn't around you. It's inside you. The cage is a living, breathing, and invisible protection device for the institution of capitalism. And you don't suspect anything until it is extremely challenging to do anything to change your position. Please don't get it twisted. This isn't a criticism of capitalism, it's merely commentary on how it works. And, more importantly, it's also insight into how to use it to help your own temperament towards it. Your current temperament is the key to the lock to the gate that can be used to access the reality that is better suited for you. And it gets even more interesting. That key is also invisible. You've had it all this time. And the only way it can be used is if you believe that you have it, and that you are willing to make that physical journey that is fueled by your own sense of belief, use the key to unlock that gate between each caste, and fulfill your goals. Understand what a caste system actually is at the operational level. It is not just a sorting mechanism. It is a stabilization mechanism. Every complex society faces the same problem. How do you prevent the natural ambition of capable individuals from destabilizing the existing distribution of power, wealth, and access? You cannot kill them all. You cannot imprison them all. You cannot even watch them all. So you do something far more elegant. You install in them, from the earliest possible age, a set of psychological programs that cause them to limit themselves automatically. You make the cage feel like a character. You make the ceiling feel like wisdom. You make the boundary feel like virtue. And then you let the conditioned mind do the work that no police force could ever do at scale. These programs are not accidents. They are not the natural residue of human development. They are socially engineered constructs designed for crowd control, for the management of expectations, for the establishment and the perpetuation of a stratified order. The institutions that installed them, schools, religious bodies, employers, family structures inherited from earlier generations, did not all coordinate consciously. They didn't have to. Each institution evolved its own internal logic, and that logic in every case required a version of you that was easier to predict than the version you were born to be. The result is a layered conditioning that operates beneath your awareness, shaping what feels possible, what feels deserved, what feels safe to want. Here's the part most people never grasp. The caste system was not designed merely to sort people into levels. It was designed to keep them there. Sorting is the surface function. Retention is the deep function. The system invests enormous energy in making lateral movement difficult and vertical movement nearly impossible without the very tools the system has trained you not to use. You were trained to climb by permission. You were trained to wait for the credential, the title, the nod from above. You were not trained to build leverage. You were not trained to identify the load-bearing weaknesses of the system around you. You were not trained to recognize that the people currently positioned above you are, in most cases, simply people who either inherited leverage or, more rarely, constructed it from nothing using exactly the methods you were taught to consider unseemly. I'm going to walk you through 6 programs. Each one was installed in you for a specific reason. Each one serves a specific function in maintaining your position in the caste. And each one, once you can see it clearly, becomes a point of leverage you can begin to exploit. Because here is the thing nobody tells you. The same conditioning that holds you in place can, once understood, become the map of how to escape. The lock and the key are made from the same metal. The first program is the obedience installation, and it began the moment you walked into a school building. Schools, in their modern mass form, were not designed to produce thinkers. They were designed to produce workers. The Prussian model, exported globally in the 19th century and still the template for most education systems on Earth, had an explicit purpose. It was built to manufacture a population that could sit still on command, follow instructions issued by authority, perform repetitive tasks accurately, accept evaluation as a normal feature of life, and wait for a bell to tell them when to begin and when to stop. This is not a description of education. It is a description of industrial conditioning. And it worked. It produced exactly what it was built to produce. People are psychologically prepared to occupy the lower and middle tiers of an industrial economy without too much friction. Before school, you treated failure as information. A child learning to walk falls, gets up, falls again, and feels no shame about it. They do not interpret the fall as a verdict on their value as a person. School changed that. School attached grades to failure. Grades attached social judgment. Social judgment attached identity. By the time you were 10, failure was no longer information. It was evidence. Evidence of whether you were smart or dumb, whether you belonged with the high group or the low group, whether you were promising or disappointing. This shift from offensive engagement with reality to defensive performance for evaluation never fully leaves a person. It becomes the default posture toward all of life. You stop reaching. You start protecting. Underneath this, something deeper was happening. School taught you that knowledge moves in one direction, from authority above to student below. Your job was to receive, to demonstrate reception, and to be evaluated on the accuracy of your reproduction. This is not education. This is an installation. It conditions you to defer to credentialed authority and to distrust your own. Unvalidated insight. Notice what this does in service of the caste system. A person who cannot trust their own perception without external validation is a person who cannot move autonomously. They are perpetually waiting for permission, and permission, you will discover, is the one thing the caste system never gives to anyone who has not first taken it. The second program is the guilt installation, and it targets the engine of ambition itself. The institutions most responsible for this program, religious frameworks in particular, but also the secular moral codes that inherit their structure, understood something true and dangerous. If you make a person feel that their own desires are morally suspect, you do not need external enforcement. You get self-enforcement. The surveillance moves inside, and the desires most consistently flagged as suspect across cultures, across centuries, are precisely the ones that would, if pursued, allow individuals to leverage themselves out of their assigned position. The pursuit of wealth, the pursuit of power, the pursuit of autonomy, the desire to be more than what you were given. These are flagged as greed, as pride, as arrogance, as ingratitude. The vocabulary of moral failure maps almost perfectly onto the vocabulary of upward mobility. This is not a critique of faith. In many cases, faith is a necessary fuel for greatness. This is an observation about how moral frameworks function as behavioral management systems. The man who feels guilty every time he prioritizes his own trajectory will not build the resources required to escape his caste. He will give away leverage as fast as he accumulates it because keeping it feels wrong. And keeping it feels wrong because he was trained from childhood to associate self-prioritization with sin. The guilt arrives before the analysis. The flinch arrives before the thought. He aborts the climb before he has even consciously begun it. Here is the operational test. When you choose yourself, genuinely, clearly, without a rationalizing story attached, does guilt arrive before you have even assessed whether the choice caused any real harm to anyone? If the answer is yes, the program is running. The guilt is not a moral alarm. It is a compliance alarm. It fires whenever you deviate from the pattern the caste requires of you. Learning to distinguish between genuine ethical alarm and conditioned compliance. Alarm is one of the most consequential discriminations a person can develop. Without it, you cannot accumulate anything. You will leak resources, leak time, leak energy, leak opportunity, every time someone signals that holding what you have makes you a worse person. The third program is the approval-seeking mechanism, and it is in many ways the most expensive program in operation because it determines whether you can hold a position. There is a man you have met, perhaps you have been him. He is competent, often more competent than his superiors. He works harder than nearly anyone around him. He delivers. By any objective measure, he is valuable. And yet he cannot hold power, not because he lacks skill, because he lacks a particular kind of indifference. Every time someone above him looks displeased, he restructures. Every time a peer fails to acknowledge him, he questions himself. Every time the room does not respond the way he hoped, he contracts and performs harder. He is running the approval program, and it costs him everything that program was supposedly protecting. The origin of this is real. A child's survival genuinely depends on parental approval. Attachment is not metaphor, it is biology. The need to secure caregiver attention is a survival mechanism, hardwired and adaptive in early life. The problem is that this mechanism does not automatically update when the survival requirement fades. By the time you are 35, your survival no longer depends on whether your father approves of your choices. But your nervous system has not received that update. It still fires the same threat response when someone of perceived authority signals displeasure. It still drives the same urgent need to repair, adjust, appease. This is what developmental psychologists call an outdated adaptation. Behavior that was functional in one context continues operating in another at tremendous cost. Now translate this into the caste system. A man driven by approval cannot negotiate effectively because negotiation requires holding a position in the face of the other party's displeasure. He cannot build authority because authority requires making decisions that some people will dislike. He cannot reject a bad opportunity, walk away from an exploitative relationship, or confront a peer who is benefiting at his expense. The cost of acting on what he sees, the anticipated disapproval, is always higher than the cost of the situation he is tolerating. The caste system loves this man. He will spend his entire life producing value that flows upward, comforted by the approval of people who would replace him in an afternoon if it served them. He performs for the wrong audience. He has for years. The audience he is performing for is not the audience whose opinion will determine the trajectory of his life. The fourth program is the scarcity loop, and it governs your financial ceiling more directly than any other mechanism. Scarcity is not a bank balance. Scarcity is a cognitive state. When the mind is dominated by resource scarcity, it operates fundamentally differently, not just in decisions about money, in every domain. The scarcity mindset captures attention. It narrows focus. It makes the immediate problem so consuming that long-term strategic thinking becomes neurologically inaccessible, not because the person is unintelligent, because their cognitive bandwidth is being entirely consumed by the alarm. Here is the critical insight. The scarcity loop does not need actual poverty to run. It needs a scarcity identity, a belief absorbed before the developmental capacity to evaluate it existed, that resources are fundamentally limited, zero-sum, and dangerous to pursue beyond a certain threshold. Money does not grow on trees. We are not like those people. Be grateful for what you have. Don't get greedy. These phrases, repeated thousands of times across childhood, become the filter through which every subsequent financial opportunity is evaluated. And the filter has one consistent output: contraction. Opportunity arrives, and the program evaluates it not for potential, but for risk. Not for what could be gained, but for what could be lost. Not for how it might lift you out of your caste, but for how it might disturb the fragile equilibrium that currently holds you in it. This is how the loop self-perpetuates. The scarcity identity produces conservative decisions. Conservative decisions produce slow progress. Slow progress reinforces the identity. The identity produces more conservative decisions. The loop runs indefinitely unless something interrupts the identity itself, not just the behavior. And the caste system is engineered to ensure that interruption never arrives organically. Everything in your environment is calibrated to confirm the scarcity story, the wage that just barely covers your needs, the promotion structure that keeps real wealth out of reach, the cultural messaging that frames the people who have escaped this loop as either lucky, unethical, or fundamentally different from you. None of which is true. They simply stopped running this program before you did. The fifth program operates through language, which makes it the most invisible of all. Language does not just describe reality. Language constructs the categories through which reality is perceived. You cannot easily think about what you do not have words for, and the vocabulary you were given to describe your own life, your own potential, your own legitimate exercise of will, was deliberately impoverished. Notice the asymmetry. You inherited a rich, detailed vocabulary for the ways a person can fall short. Lazy, arrogant, naive, unrealistic, ungrateful, reckless, full of yourself, too big for your boots. Dozens of precise words for the failure modes the caste system needs you to fear. Now consider the vocabulary you were given for the legitimate exercise of your own power, for strategic self-interest, for ambition unattached to apology. The vocabulary thins out immediately. It feels uncomfortable in your mouth. It sounds, when you try to use it, like someone else is speaking. This is not accidental. A caste system that needs manageable subjects does not give those subjects a rich vocabulary for power. It gives them a rich vocabulary for the ways they should not exercise it. And because you cannot think clearly about what you cannot name precisely, you operate at a permanent disadvantage in any negotiation, any self-assessment, any attempt to chart your own course. The man who knows what he doesn't know, who has enough sophistication to see the complexity of his domain, consistently underestimates his relative capability. He undersells himself in rooms full of people who are objectively less competent, but linguistically equipped to claim more space. The world responds to your language before it responds to your ability. You were given the language of contraction, and it has been performing poorly on your behalf for decades. The sixth program is the one that holds all the others in place, and it is the hardest to see because by adulthood, it has merged with your identity. The behaviors the first 5 programs produce, the obedience, the guilt, the approval seeking, the scarcity, the smallness of language, do not remain external. Over time, they become who you are. They become the self-image you protect. You become the reliable one. the one who does not make waves, the one who shows up, does the work, does not demand. You become known for your manageability, and then, this is the critical step, you begin to take pride in it. The compliance becomes a virtue, and a virtue is the deepest form of cage, because you cannot question something you are proud of. I'm the kind of person who honors commitments, even when they are destroying me. I'm not motivated by money, even as I am suffocated by its absence. I don't play politics, even as politics determines every outcome around me. These are not values. They are sophisticated, identity-level defenses against the fear of what would happen if you actually chose yourself. Underneath every compliance identity is the same fear. The fear that the real you, the strategic, ambitious, self-directed version, is not lovable. That the only way to remain connected to people you love, to your community, to your sense of belonging, is to keep yourself small enough to remain safe. The caste system attached love to limitation. It made smallness feel like connection and expansion feel like abandonment. That is its most precise wound. So that is the architecture. 6 programs, each functional in its installation, each catastrophic when allowed to run unexamined into adult life. Now let us talk about what the caste system looks like once you can see it from outside, and what liberty actually means at each level of it. At the bottom of the caste, liberty is essentially 0. The person at this level spends nearly all of their available time and cognitive bandwidth securing the basic conditions of survival. Their choices are not really choices. They are responses to immediate pressure. The job is whatever pays this week. The home is wherever they can afford. The food is whatever requires the least time to prepare. Their nervous system lives in a permanent low-grade emergency, which means strategic thought is nearly impossible. The programs run them completely. The scarcity loop is not a belief at this level. It is also a fact. And the system is designed so that the fact and the belief reinforce each other, making escape a problem the person at this level lacks the resources to even properly conceive of, let alone execute. Their liberty is the liberty of a person being carried by a current. They can flail, but the direction is determined by forces larger than them. One level up, in the working middle of the caste, liberty expands modestly. The basic survival requirements are mostly secured, but the margin is thin. A medical event, a job loss, a family emergency would collapse them back to the lower level immediately. They have slightly more cognitive bandwidth, which means they can plan a few weeks or months ahead, but rarely years. They have access to small luxuries, which the system uses brilliantly to suggest that they are doing well, that they have arrived. The liberty at this level is mostly the liberty of distraction. They can choose between consumer options. They can choose between entertainments. They can choose between similar versions of essentially the same constrained life, but they cannot choose to opt out of the wage relationship that defines their week. They cannot choose to take a year off. They cannot choose to refuse a directive from above without serious consequences. Their liberty is real, but narrow, and most of it is exercised in the domain of consumption rather than the domain of direction. Higher in the caste, in what is sometimes called the professional class, liberty expands meaningfully. There is genuine choice about location, about partner, about career path within certain bounds. There is the ability to absorb a moderate setback without complete collapse. There is enough cognitive bandwidth to think in years rather than weeks. But there is also a deeper trap at this level, because the appearance of liberty is much greater than the substance of it. The person at this level is still fundamentally renting their existence from a system that can revoke their access. They still report to someone. Their income still has a ceiling determined by what their employer is willing to pay. Their schedule is still largely determined by external requirement. They have purchased the illusion of arrival, which is one of the most expensive purchases a person can make because it stops them from continuing to build. Many people at this level will spend the rest of their lives here, mistaking the comfort of the cage for the absence of one. Higher still, where ownership begins, liberty changes character entirely. The person at this level owns assets that generate income without requiring their continuous presence. They own portions of businesses, of real property, of intellectual property, of capital that works while they sleep. Their time begins to belong to them. Their schedule reflects their priorities rather than someone else's. They can refuse opportunities, can wait out bad markets, can absorb significant losses without collapse. The programs are still there, often deeply embedded, but the consequences of running them are no longer immediately catastrophic. The liberty at this level is the liberty of choice about how to spend a day, a year, a decade. Most people will never experience this level, not because they lack the capacity, because the programs convince them not to attempt the climb. At the top of the caste, liberty becomes structural. The person at this level does not merely have the ability to make choices about their own life. They have the ability to influence the structure within which other people make choices. They shape policy, markets, narratives, the rules of the game itself. Their liberty is the liberty of authorship. This is rare and it is largely closed to entry. But understanding that this level exists is important because it clarifies what the caste system is actually protecting at its highest tier. It is protecting the right to write rules for everyone below. Now hold all of this in mind and consider your own position. You almost certainly know where you currently sit. The instinct of denial will arrive, but push it aside and look. The honest look is the prerequisite for everything that follows. Because here is what most people get wrong about the climb. They think it is a matter of will. They think they simply need to want it more, to work harder, to push past the resistance. The caste system loves this framing. The caste system can absorb infinite individual effort without ever moving anyone meaningfully upward. Effort without leverage is the wage relationship in its purest form. You exchange your finite hours for someone else's expanding assets, and you call it ambition. The escape from your current level is not built from effort. It is built from leverage, and leverage requires a completely different orientation than effort. Effort is what you do to extract resources from your existing position. Leverage is what you build to extract value from positions you do not yet occupy. Leverage is capital that earns while you sleep. Leverage is a skill rare enough that the market must compete to access it. Leverage is a network in which your single message activates the resources of 100 other people. Leverage is intellectual property that produces income detached from your time. Leverage is the position you occupy in someone else's calculation. It is the structural advantage that means a small motion on your part produces a large effect in the world. The programs were installed to ensure you never built any of this. Notice the alignment. The obedience program ensures you wait for permission before constructing anything. The guilt program ensures you feel morally suspect for accumulating any. The approval program ensures you will trade the leverage you build for the validation of people who do not have your interests in mind. The scarcity program ensures you treat the construction of leverage as dangerous indulgence rather than necessary infrastructure. The language program ensures you do not have the vocabulary to identify, name, or claim the leverage you are entitled to. And the compliance identity ensures that even if you stumbled onto leverage by accident, you would give it away to preserve your sense of yourself as a good person. Every program, examined precisely, is a leverage prevention mechanism. They do not stop you from working. They stop you from building. This is why understanding the programs is not philosophical exercise. It is the operational prerequisite for any real movement out of your current caste level. You cannot accumulate what you have been trained to give away. You cannot leverage what you have been trained not to want. You cannot deploy what you have been trained to feel guilty about deploying. The deconditioning is not a personal journey. It is infrastructure work. It is clearing the conditions necessary for leverage to be built and held. Now think about the level below yours, the one you are trying to escape from. Think of it not as a place, but as a force, a gravitational field. Every caste level has its own gravity, and the lower the level, the stronger the pull. The gravity is composed of all the conditions that hold a person at that level. The financial pressures, the social environment, the cognitive load, the relationships built around the assumption that you will remain at this level, the internal programs that fire whenever you try to move. You feel this gravity every time you attempt to act in a way that does not fit your current level. It pulls you back. It tells you the new behavior is unnatural, dangerous, presumptuous. It uses guilt, it uses fear, it uses social discomfort, it uses the disapproval of people you love. The gravity is not your enemy. It is simply the physics of the level you are in. But like any gravity, it must be overcome, and overcoming it requires not just energy, but the correct application of it. You have probably heard of the principle of mechanical leverage. A small force, applied at the correct point, can move a load many times its own size. The lever does not generate force. It redirects it. It multiplies the effect of the available input by changing where and how it is applied. This is the only way out of your current caste level, not by working harder against the gravity, which simply exhausts you, but by constructing levers that allow your available force to produce disproportionate movement. A single skill, developed to rare depth, becomes a lever. A single piece of intellectual property that scales without your continued involvement becomes a lever. A single asset that compounds becomes a lever. A single relationship with someone 3 levels above you in the caste becomes a lever. None of these require you to be twice as strong as the gravity holding you. They require you to apply your available strength at the point where it produces maximum effect. There is a related image that I want you to hold in your mind as a model for how this kind of movement actually works in practice. Picture a row of dominoes. The first domino is small, the size of a thumbnail. You can topple it with the lightest push. The second domino in the row is slightly larger. The third is larger still. Each subsequent domino is roughly 1.5 times the size of the one before it. By the 18th domino, you are looking at a piece taller than a man. By the 23rd, taller than a house. By the 30th, taller than a skyscraper. And here is the part that matters. Each domino, when it falls, has enough mass to topple the next one in the sequence, even though the next one is significantly larger than itself. The chain transmits force. The energy that began as a single fingertip push at the smallest piece becomes, by the end of the sequence, enough force to bring down a structure no individual could possibly move directly. This is what leverage looks like deployed over time. You do not begin by trying to topple the skyscraper. You cannot. The gravity holding the skyscraper in place is many orders of magnitude greater than the force available to you. But you can topple the smallest domino in front of you right now. And the smallest domino, if you have arranged the sequence correctly, falls into the second one, which falls into the third, and so on. Each piece of leverage you construct enables the next, slightly larger piece. Each level you escape provides the conditions under which the next escape becomes possible. The man at the top of the caste did not get there by overcoming the system in a single confrontation. He arranged a sequence. He built a small lever, used it to construct a larger one, used that to construct one larger still, and continued the sequence with discipline until the cumulative force was sufficient to displace structures that would have been impossible to confront directly. This is the orientation you need, not the orientation of effort against the gravity, which is the orientation of the wage worker, but the orientation of sequence. What is the smallest domino in front of you right now? What is the lever you could construct this month that would make the next lever possible? What is the asset, the skill, the relationship, the piece of intellectual property that you could build now whose existence would change the conditions of your next move. This is the question the caste system trains you not to ask. The caste system trains you to ask what you should do next within your current level. The escape requires that you ask what you should build now that would change which level the question even applies to. Building leverage while still adhering to many of the programs is the difficult middle ground that everyone serious about escape eventually finds themselves in. You will not have all 6 programs deconditioned before you need to start building. You will be doing both at once. You will be constructing your first lever while still feeling guilty for constructing it. You will be negotiating for more while your approval program screams. You will be holding capital while your scarcity loop tells you to spend it on something safer, smaller, more conforming to who you have always been. This tension is not a sign you are doing it wrong. It is the precise sensation of the escape in progress. The programs will continue to fire. Your job is not to wait for them to stop. Your job is to act while they are still firing, to construct in spite of them, to allow the constructed leverage to gradually change the conditions that the programs are responding to. Here is what often happens. A person makes the first move, builds the first small piece of leverage, and immediately the social environment around them begins to respond. Old relationships strain. Family members express concern. Peers begin to make jokes about the change in them. The gravitational field of their current level activates fully. This is the moment most people retreat. The discomfort feels like evidence that they have done something wrong, when in fact the discomfort is evidence that they have done something correctly. The system is responding to the threat of their movement exactly as the system is designed to respond. If you understand this, you can stand inside the discomfort without interpreting it as a verdict. The discomfort is just the gravity. It is what leaving feels like. The practical sequence looks like this. You begin by identifying which program is currently most expensive to you. Not all of them at once. The one that is most directly preventing the next move. For some men, this is the approval program because it is keeping them from negotiating for the income they need to begin accumulating capital. For others, it is the scarcity program because they are earning enough but giving the surplus back to the system in fear-driven consumption. For others, it is the guilt program because every time they begin to accumulate, an internal voice insists that they are becoming the wrong kind of person. You identify the program that is most directly between you and the first domino, and you do the focused work of seeing it clearly, naming it when it fires, and acting against it in small repeated tests until the program's authority weakens. Simultaneously, you begin constructing the first lever. Not the perfect lever, not the final lever, the first one. The smallest piece of leverage you can build with the resources you currently have. A small piece of intellectual property. A skill that is rare in your local market. A relationship with someone slightly above your current level whose trust you can earn through consistent value delivery. A small asset that begins to produce income detached from your time. The first lever almost never produces significant returns by itself. Its purpose is not return. Its purpose is to make the second lever possible. People who get stuck at the first lever are people who evaluated it as if it were supposed to change their life immediately. It was not. It was supposed to change the conditions under which the next move becomes available. Then you build the second lever, which is possible only because the first one exists. And then the third, which is possible only because the second one exists. The sequence compounds. The gravity at each new level is different, less severe in some ways, more sophisticated in others, but the principle of leverage continues to apply. At every level, the question is the same. What is the smallest lever I can construct now that makes the next lever possible? The caste system has no answer to a person who can hold this question consistently across years. The system is built for people who confront it directly or not at all. It is not built for people who patiently construct sequences. I want to be honest about what this requires. It requires that you tolerate, for an extended period, the sensation of operating against a current. It requires that you accept that some of your current relationships will not survive your movement, and that this is information about those relationships rather than evidence against your movement. It requires that you maintain the discipline of sequence when the immediate evidence is unimpressive, when the first lever has not produced returns and the impulse to abandon it for something more dramatic is strong. The men who escape their caste are not the most talented. They are the most patient with the construction of leverage. They are the ones who understood early that the question is never whether you are working hard enough, but whether your work is going into structures that compound. There is something else worth naming. The caste system is not just held in place by your programs. It is held in place by the programs of everyone around you. Your family runs the programs. Your friends run the programs. Your colleagues run the programs. When you begin to deviate, you do not just feel your own gravity. You feel theirs, mediated through their reactions to you. They are not being malicious. They are being conditioned exactly as you were, and your movement triggers their conditioning. They will, in many cases, attempt to pull you back to your assigned level, not because they want you to fail, but because your movement is a threat to the equilibrium that holds them in place. If you can rise, it means they could too, and the prospect of facing that possibility is unbearable to a nervous system that has organized itself around its impossibility. So they will, often gently and often without awareness, try to restore you to the position that confirms their own resignation. Recognizing this is critical. It is not personal. It is the system protecting itself through the people closest to you. The cure is not confrontation. The cure is environmental expansion. New inputs, new reference groups, new relationships with people who are running different programs and for whom your ambition is unremarkable because they have their own. So where does this leave you? It leaves you, I hope, with a clearer picture than you had an hour ago. You are not failing. You are not lazy. You are not insufficiently motivated. You are positioned within a caste system that was engineered to keep you where it found you, and the engineering operates primarily through programs that were installed in you so early that you mistake them for your character. The escape from your current level is not a matter of will. It is a matter of leverage, constructed in sequence, while the programs continue to fire and the gravity continues to pull. The first lever is small, so small that the part of you trained by the caste system to think in terms of immediate dramatic outcomes will be tempted to dismiss it. Do not dismiss it. The first lever is not supposed to change your life. It is supposed to make the second lever possible. The second lever is supposed to make the third possible. The compounding sequence is the only thing the caste system genuinely fears, because it is the only thing the caste system cannot easily absorb. The man who walks this path does not become reckless. He does not become exploitative. He does not become disconnected from the people who matter to him. He becomes precise. He knows exactly what he will and will not give. He knows the difference between genuine generosity and compulsive self-erasure. He knows the difference between earned humility and installed smallness. He is harder to manipulate, harder to keep at his assigned level, harder to. Convinced that the gravity holding him is the natural order of things, and that, more than any single asset he eventually owns, is the substance of his liberty. There were 6 programs. You have seen them now. You know which ones are running most loudly in you. You know which decisions you have been making from fear rather than strategy. You know which version of yourself you have been performing in service of a caste position that was assigned to you without your consent. The question is not what you are going to do. The question is what you are going to begin building, starting from your current position, knowing what you now know about what is actually holding you there. The first domino is in front of you. It is small. You can topple it with very little force. Everything that follows is what you build with the falling. The skyscraper at the end of the sequence is not unreachable. It is just far away, and the only path to it runs through the small piece of leverage you are willing to construct this week. Begin there. The sequence will carry you the rest of the way. How can you capitalize with each step? Make sure that what you can is enough to use as a vessel for the next step.